Hi, and welcome to Data and Donuts. I'm Mara Sedlins, the Data Management Specialist at Morgan Library at Colorado State University. This session will cover tools that make your research more reproducible. Specifically, we're going to define reproducible research, discuss its advantages, and present some tools that make reproducible research easier. Normally, we think of research in the following cycle, from hypothesis generation, experimental design, data collection, to data analysis and publishing results. However, modern research methods have introduced complications. New technology produces huge, complex data sets that require automation to analyze. It also gives us the ability to share more than just a manuscript in a print journal. Additionally, journals and funding agencies are requiring researchers to make their research more transparent by sharing data and analysis methods in addition to producing peer-reviewed manuscripts. Because of these issues, the research cycle looks more complicated, with multiple complex steps in data processing and analysis, and multiple types of shared research outputs like data and code. Thus, documenting your research process and sharing code and data in addition to the research article are all integral parts to reproducible research. Before we get too far into the details, I want to discuss the difference between reproducibility and replication, because these words are used differently in different fields. For our purposes, replication is answering a research question with a new experiment and coming to the same conclusion, which is the scientific gold standard. However, replication is not always feasible, such as costly clinical trials or measuring real-world events in real time like climate data. Reproducibility is the minimum standard to assure scientific validity, providing enough information to get the same results from the same data and the same source code. So essentially, replication is where new researchers approach a scientific claim made by another researcher and use the same methods but collect new data, and then they perform their own analysis to assess the validity of that claim. Whereas reproducibility is when another individual can take the same data and code underlying a project and use that data and code to exactly replicate the results, tables, and figures. So I can hand my data and code underlying my research paper to someone else, and they can use those materials to verify that the data and code truly can produce my findings. To get a little more specific, computational reproducibility is when detailed information is provided about code, software, hardware, and implementation details. Empirical reproducibility is when detailed information is provided about non-computational, empirical scientific experiments and observations. In practice, this is enabled by making data freely available, as well as details about how the data was collected. And finally, statistical reproducibility is when detailed information is provided about the choice of statistical tests, model parameters, threshold values, etc. This mostly relates to pre-registration of study design to prevent p-value hacking and other questionable research practices. For our purposes, reproducible research is the practice of distributing all data, software, source code, and tools required to reproduce the results discussed in a research publication. Put simply, reproducible research is data plus code. And even more simply, reproducible research is about making the process of research more transparent and reliable. I find it useful to think of reproducibility as a spectrum from providing results and a description of the methods in a publication to full replication. There's no one right way to do things, but it's good to strive to be as close to the right end of the spectrum as you can. Now that we know what reproducible research is, let's talk about why you might want to adopt reproducible research practices. First, it's an excellent way to show that your research results are true. When someone has access to your data and code and can get the same results, it's hard to deny that what you found is valid. It also accelerates science by letting other researchers use your code and data for their own research. With funding being tight, being able to reuse research projects efficiently is a great way to use science. It's also for the public good. Taxpayers largely fund our research budgets, and being efficient and transparent about our process increases trust and decreases mistakes. For example, a research group who was looking at cancer drugs had made a mistake in their code that reversed the outcomes of drug treatment in their model, resulting in ineffective drugs being given to patients. Another research group who was trying to reproduce their studies figured out what was going on and stopped a harmful clinical trial. Finally, it's good for you. Research products like public datasets and software are increasingly getting considered for grant applications and citation counts, tripling your research output for one project. And doing things reproducibly makes things easier to repeat, which is good because research is repetitive by nature. We have to run independent replicates, we do the same assays on different samples, we test the generalizability of our results to different populations and contexts, and we run longitudinal experiments. When you're repeating the same thing over and over, doing things by hand is really inefficient. It's slow from the outset, and it's hard to repeat and document. RStudio has tools that make it easier to make your analysis reproducible. In this workshop, I'm going to discuss using RScript, Git, and RMarkdown. I won't be going into depth about the mechanics of using these tools here. There are some workshops in the Coding and Cookies series that get into the specifics of using R with RMarkdown and Git. In this video series, I'm planning to do an overview of what these tools can do and how they fit into a reproducible research workflow.